Hello and welcome to Fight News Now. I'm John Pollock. Coming up over the next hour, we are going to be chatting with former Bellator light heavyweight champion Emmanuel Newton. We'll also be discussing that Bellator 149 card that is coming up next week in Houston, Texas, headlined by Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie, as well as Dada 5000 and Kimbo Slice. We'll be chatting with John Ramdine and Robin Black about all of today's news, including the latest on Jon Jones and his court date coming up in March, as well as the UFC adding a number of bouts to their card in Brisbane, plus a look at the legacies of some of the greatest fighters of the present generation. All that and lots more to come. Keep it tuned here on Fight News Now. Joined as always here by John Ramdine and Robin Black, and we are going to be taking a look at all of the news going on today, including Bellator 149, which we are only a week away from, and we're going to start things off with an interview I conducted earlier this week with former light heavyweight champion Emmanuel Newton, who we last saw against Phil Davis last September, and quite often we'll hear fighters say they got screwed in their last fight, not always from a literal perspective, but this time Emmanuel Newton giving us some insight on his pre-fight activities that may have affected his performance against Phil Davis.
I mean, I don't feel that I lost that fight because I had sex, because that sounds like I'm taking something away from Phil Davis. Phil Davis is a phenomenal fighter, and I'll never take anything away from him. But I definitely could feel the difference. Obviously, a man knows when you have sex, the last thing you want to do is go out and fight, So it's just, but it was all meant to happen, because, I wouldn't trade it or change it. Would I do it again? Definitely not, but like I said, lessons learned, just made that mistake or that was meant to happen, and I learned from it, and I felt it, and just lets me know that like, oh, you're not invincible. You think, I would always paying attention to my omens and my whole spirituality of everything, but I was kind of going down, I guess you could say, a darker path. When it comes down to the understanding, I was getting more into the whole chakras and, the pineal gland and cerebral cortex and all that stuff, which a lot of people are obese. If you look around now, that's happening all over the place. People are becoming more spiritual because it is that time, it is something that's just happening in the world right now because it's, I guess you could say it's that season. But I wasn't meant to be like that. I was meant to be more a Bible man. I was meant to understand things more from a standpoint of God and not a standpoint of man, so that's what I've gone through this past year, and I wouldn't change it because I feel so much better now. I feel like I've grown so much closer to the Lord, and that is my main goal, is to serve Him and not to serve myself.
Was that the first time you had ever had sex so close to a fight before? Had you ever done that before?
Never. I had never done that. Never done that before. So it was, many things happened, that day, that led me to that outcome, and it was just that just goes to show me even more, that God was in it, that He was allowing me to make the mistake that I made, so that I could learn. It's like a father, like when you say don't touch a stove because it's hot, and then you touch it, like, see, told you so. Now So I truly feel that the Lord was with me and everything that I do, because He knows what I'm going to do before I do it, because He's omnipresent. He is E equals MC squared. Like He's everywhere. So He's before me and behind me. Above me and below me. So that's just how the Creator rolls.
So there you have it, a first, I think, in terms of a description of what went wrong in a fighter's last outing, which resulted in a loss. You always hear that term. You never have sex before a big game. Maybe, is there something to this, Robin?
Well, I must say, my fourth fight, I was going for my second win, and I had sex that afternoon. I won that fight. I won that fight in the first round. Now, if I was fighting Phil Davis, no, I'd have still done it, because that might have been the last time I ever got to have sex, because Phil Davis might have killed me. Hey, listen, man, whatever works for you, whatever works as far, there are sports psychologists and there are performance psychologists who try to create structure and order in the way that you look at fighting. And then there's this sort of thinking where you just let it go where it's going to go, and if it works, and it's been working for this guy. He fights randomly. He fights with sort of a random thought in the way he fights, and clearly this kind of explains it.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen many fighters. Some people they believe in a higher power. This guy clearly one of those. There are other people on the other side of the fence that say that's just a crutch. There's no imaginary man in the sky. and it's a false belief. But again, we've seen some of the strongest fighters in the world. It comes down to faith, and they credit their success because there's structure there. And maybe this is one of those things that Emmanuel Newton needs.
I wasn't questioning the faith part. I was questioning the how we got from sex to E equals MC squared part. That's the faith part. Lots and lots of great fighters. Chris Weidman will tell you the reason he was the champion, and the reason he'll be the champion again is because of his faith in God. So I'm not questioning that part per se. But the sex part is a little crazy. Maybe he's trolling us. Maybe he's just like, hey, man, I want people
Well, he
to
did
know.
state right at the beginning. He's not completely writing it off because of this reason.
It's Phil
but
Davis,
felt
for
that there
God's
was-
sakes.
Yeah, exactly. This was, arguably the top light heavyweight in the company at this point. He's not the champion, but Phil Davis very much, I feel, would be favored if you put him against Liam McGeary. That is not the man who Emmanuel Newton is fighting next week, though. He's got a rematch with Newton-Vassell, and we'll hear a bit more from Newton discussing their first fight and if he expects any changes this time around from Newton-Vassell.
Yes and no. I know that from when I saw him fight Mo, his striking wasn't too different. His grappling seemed to be a lot the same. I mean, obviously Mo's a very good wrestler, so it's always going to be harder to take a guy like Mo down. But I'm expecting obviously a different mindset because he has had more fights now. So he is more seasoned. And I'm sure he's going to be strong. Because he's always strong, putting in the weights and putting in the time in the gym. But style-wise, I don't see it being too much of a difference. And also, I'm not planning on freaking being on the ground with him a whole bunch. And if we are, I'm not looking to freaking stay down there and just try to ride him out.
Now, the first time around, they had a very entertaining fight with Newton catching him very late in the fight. That, at the time, was for the light heavyweight title, so a 3-round fight. And this also goes to the philosophy of Bellator, that here we have these big stars on top that are hopefully going to generate a larger audience so that we can showcase other people that are on this main card, such as Emmanuel Newton and Newton-Vassell. Do you think that is translating with people, or are they going to be tuning in on Friday, really not aware who's fighting underneath the two bigger fights?
Yeah, I think if you ask most casual fans, they have no idea who Emmanuel Newton is. I mean, viewers of Fight Network, we've profiled him in the MFC, so people have watched his progression. As Robin pointed out, kind of an unorthodox style. He kind of breaks a lot of rules. And I think if you were going to pay attention, it was that fight with King Mo that we're seeing right now, where he managed to stop him. Everybody was favoring King Mo in that situation. But again, I think even with King Mo, a lot of casual fans don't know who this guy is. It's only the hardcore fans that understood that was a big victory for Emmanuel Newton. But I love that the Bellator organization is doing what they need to do. They brought in Phil Davis, a high-profile 205-pound fighter, so they're trying to develop their divisions. So you have guys like Tito Ortiz, you have your champion Liam McGeary, who's a massive guy, very entertaining fighter. It's just trying to compile the right set of fighters at 205 pounds to try to create that interest.
I'm still trying to work out what he was saying earlier.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, I was like, maybe it's just trolling us. Maybe making sure that people are paying attention to what he's saying. But then you think about the unpredictability of his style. When you roll his highlight reel, it's all crazy stuff. That's how he thinks. I don't want to say he's a random thinker, but he thinks on his own path. He takes a different path, and he doesn't even necessarily know where he's going. And if he doesn't know where he's going, you, his opponent, don't know where he's going. That's what makes him so dangerous. It's also what makes him must-see TV when he fights. You're right. Unless you're a big Bellator fan, or you followed through the MFC, or you're a real hardcore fan, maybe some people aren't fully aware of every fighter out there. This is a guy you do need to watch. He's very fun to watch.
A very interesting story with Emmanuel Newton, and we'll have more of that interview coming up later in the hour. But we transition now to the UFC's return to Brisbane, Australia, coming up March the 20th, and they've added a pair of fights. Rinda Kai, who just disappeared after that Miesha Tate fight, she'll be fighting Leslie Smith. And then at flyweight, we have Ben Nguyen taking on Justin Scoggins. And Scoggins, who looked fantastic last weekend. I think he really got buried with everything involving Stephen Thompson and the main card stuff. Scoggins had an excellent performance against a very tough opponent in Ray Borg, stating afterwards that he's going to win the flyweight title by the end of the year. I'm somewhat surprised by this opponent. I don't know if this is necessarily a step up from a guy like Ray Borg, but Justin Scoggins, I think he has left ATT, returned to South Carolina, and we saw a much different Justin Scoggins this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, the kid's only 24 years of age, so this is just another fight. You look at what's happening at 125 pounds. If we were to show the rankings, there are so many guys at the top of that list. For example, Justin Scoggins lost to Dustin Ortiz, and I don't even think Dustin Ortiz is ranked in the top 10 right now. So you can take your time with this guy, especially you know what type of talent you have. You saw his confidence. You saw what he was capable of in that victory over Ray Borg. So you don't have to rush him. You know what's happening right now with Demetrius Johnson. He's got Henry Cejudo. So you want the supporting cast. You want the future to be stable, and I think a guy like Justin Scoggins, you can kind of bank on him for the next 5 years.
You know, you look at what the prototype of 125 is, really, the prototype of the perfect mixed martial artist is Demetrius Johnson. And Demetrius Johnson controls speed and range and distance, how you're going to engage and when you're going to engage. He controls that. That's what Scoggins did in that fight. He did it against a very dangerous guy, a guy who wanted to get a hold of him and rip him to the ground. He's like, we're not doing that. You're going to chase me. When you chase me, I'm going to hit you. If you keep chasing me, I'm going to keep hitting you. If I hit you and you eventually move away, then I'm going to feast on you at distance. Not unlike what Stephen Thompson did very quickly to Hendricks. And Ben Nguyen is a great fighter, and he's on the ground. He's very much like Borg, really dominant. I got to call his fight against Eric Perez, an opponent we share in common. Look how good he looks. Look how good this guy looks. But again, the game plan for Scoggins may be exactly the same. A guy with a shorter reach, a guy with shorter height, a guy who wants to get on your back. You can't get on my back because you can't get a hold of me, and I'm going to pick on you from the outside.
Is there a value, do you feel, in various weight classes where, you know, we're always looking at an opponent that looks great and what's the next big step up, and sometimes it's fighting guys that are relatively in that same area so that a 24-year-old Justin Scoggins is not just thrust in to a title situation. You mentioned Henry Cejudo just the other day. Is he necessarily ready for this fight? Was Kyoji Horiguchi? But that's the state of the flyweight division. There's not always a value attached to being patient in the short term, but long term there can be.
Yeah, there can be, but at the same time, you know, in a developing division like 125 pounds where Demetrius Johnson has already faced the majority of top contenders, you want to get your crack because you never know how long you're going to last in the game of mixed martial arts, and that's why I think Justin Scoggins, he wasn't just hyping himself up. I honestly believed after that performance, he was so confident, and he is still confident, that he will challenge, if he was to be in there against Demetrius Johnson tomorrow, that not only would he be competitive, that he feels that he would beat him. I don't know if that's a realistic thing because we all recognize Demetrius Johnson as one of the best to ever play the game because of his speed and his movement and his fight IQ. There's so many reasons to love this guy, but just the fact that Scoggins believes, after watching Demetrius Johnson, that he can get in there, not only compete with him, but defeat him, really speaks volumes.
It does, but you know, what would you do if you really were informed about what he was capable of growing into? Yeah. If you really knew, you can't know, that's the hard part, but if you knew what he could become in 3 years, and that thing would be enough to beat what Demetrius is in 3 years, you'd hold him back. You don't know. You don't know if he'll blow out his knee. You don't know how it'll go. So you take the chance when you get it these days. Also, you try and you fail at 24 years old. I'm going to get another shot at 27 years old. So you take it when you can get it to a degree.
Jon Jones had a very weird week this week, and it resulted in the fact that it was a traffic violation. He didn't have his license or his registration on him. 3 days were tacked on to his current probation, and this on its own, it's not a story. It's not really relevant. But this is a guy that is serving a probation period. He's had the 3 days added on. He's now got to take a day out, a month out from his fight to go into court, which is just an annoyance for him. But it just seems to be a very strange indication here. Do you just call this a slip up on his part? I mean, are we looking too deep into this?
No,
I guess is my question.
I don't think we're looking too deep because I think we all expected after that serious situation with Jon Jones for him to take a step away from mixed martial arts and get everything figured out. Now, again, it's impossible to get everything figured out, but this is one of those small things that he shouldn't neglect. And if he's neglecting these things, is he neglecting other areas of his life? Is he slipping up in those areas? So, again, we expect not, but it's definitely a question that has to creep into your mind.
The only question related to this that creeps into my mind is this a distraction in any way for him? He did go on some kind of social media thing and be like, why is anybody paying attention to this? I'm about to take the light heavyweight championship of the world. I like that thinking, but taking that minute to even put that out there is a distraction he doesn't need. He's a young man of unparalleled talent who's training at a level he's never trained at in his life. and he's going to be one of the most dominant athletes you've ever seen and one of the great fights you're ever going to see when he fights DC. So I personally don't care if he gets a traffic ticket.
Yeah, and again, if it wasn't for the fact he was on probation and had all this other stuff, this is a non-issue.
Exactly.
I do not care about a fighter getting a traffic ticket, but it's just something that you just see so much talent that this guy has, and it's like you just want to see him realize all of this, and it's just such silly, silly stuff. We move on to Tito Ortiz, and what is going to be next for him?
Talking about silly stuff.
Well, he's throwing out.
We all do.
He's throwing out Fedor. He's throwing out Kimbo Slice's name. What we can look at is his last fight with Liam McGeary, which Tito Ortiz going for that light heavyweight title. It wasn't a big success on Spike TV. Maybe this is the route. Tito Ortiz and grouping him with these fighters like a Kimbo Slice or the Frank Shamrock idea. That was thrown his way. He said, no, I want to fight Liam McGeary. What is next for Tito Ortiz?
Yeah, I mean, Tito's a name, but again, it's very, very difficult because, I don't know, can people bank on Tito Ortiz? We've seen many, many times Tito back out of certain things. We've seen the excuses from Tito Ortiz, so it's very difficult to get excited about Tito Ortiz's fight. You know, come fight time, come the night of the fight, it's like, okay, finally we're going to get it. And I think a fight with Fedor or a fight with Vanderlei Silva, I think that would make sense. But again, is it going to happen? Tito does such a great job of talking a big game. It's just, will it ever happen?
I still love you, Tito.
We do love you.
I still love you, man. But hey, listen, either we think he's over the hill, in which case, let him fight Kimbo. That's a fight that they'll make money. He'll enjoy that fight. Kimbo will like that fight. That's a great fight. Is he not over the hill and we still think he's got something? Let him fight Fedor. I think those are great ideas, Tito. I'm on your side.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for our chat about the news, but I want to remind everyone that our coverage of Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping, be sure to tune in on Saturday, February 27th, beginning at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and that fight will be airing exclusively here in Canada on Fight Network.